Have you ever wondered what would happen if someone with a badge and a gun made the mistake of targeting the wrong man? Not the kind of wrong man who's rich or famous, but the kind of man who doesn't need a press conference to end a career because he carries justice in his very voice and the law in his blood. Imagine that man stripped of his robe, his courtroom, his title. Imagine him kneeling in gravel, staring down the barrel of a gun held by a cop who thinks he's in control. What would you do if your life rested in the hands of someone who has no idea who you really are? This story begins with a car, not just any car, but a 2008 Lincoln Town car, black polish and gleaming like obsidian as it glided through the back roads of Clayton County, Georgia. Behind the wheel sat a man in his 60s, wearing a plain navy polo and khakis. His hands were steady on the wheel, his eyes distant, his thoughts far from the road. This was not a man in a rush. He was a man on a ritual. Every year, on this very day, he drove this very route. Every year, he carried a bouquet of white lilies, his wife Sarah's favorite flower, to her grave. This was the 5th time he made that journey without her. The man's name was Arthur Vance. In any federal courtroom across the American South, that name would cause prosecutors to sit straighter, defense attorneys to sweat, and reporters to lean in. Judge Arthur Vance of the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals wasn't just respected, he was revered. But today, he wasn't wearing his black robe. Today, he wasn't your honor. Today, he was just a grieving husband trying to keep a promise. As the sky darkened above and the Georgia humidity wrapped around the asphalt like a wet shroud, a different kind of shadow crept up behind him, a police cruiser, creeping like a predator just out of view. Then came the lights, flashing red and blue, cutting through the quiet like a siren scream. Arthur glanced at the speedometer. 55. Legal. He hadn't changed lanes, hadn't run a light. He knew he hadn't broken the law. But the law doesn't always protect the innocent, especially when the innocent look like him. He didn't argue. He didn't panic. He signaled and slowly pulled to the shoulder. In the patrol car behind him, Officer Mark Miller grinned, cracking his knuckles against the steering wheel. "See that, rookie?" He sneered to the young man beside him. Black man in a luxury car. "Let's find out who he thinks he is." The rookie, David Peterson, looked uneasy. "But what did he do?" he asked. "Nothing," Miller snapped. "Just right, he failed to signal. Who's gonna check?" And so, it began. What neither man in that patrol car knew was that their lives were about to change forever. Because the man they thought was just another black driver was anything but ordinary. He was the system they were trying to exploit. And while Arthur Vance had come to mourn, what he would end up doing was ignite a federal storm unlike anything the sleepy town of Oak Creek had ever seen. The robe was gone, but justice had just arrived. The cruiser doors slammed shut like a warning shot. Officer Mark Miller stepped out with an air of entitlement, his hand casually resting on the sidearm clipped to his belt. The southern heat shimmered off the road, but it wasn't the sun that made the air heavy, it was the tension, thick and electric, the kind that precedes something irreversible. He adjusted his sunglasses, squared his shoulders, and swaggered toward the black Lincoln. Inside the car, Arthur Vance remained composed. Both hands were visible on the steering wheel at the 10. And to position, his posture straight, expression calm. He knew the game. He had seen it play out in court too many times, officers lying on the stand, video evidence telling a different story, and citizens left broken in the wake of it all. But he also knew something else. Unlike those defendants, he had a secret no one in this town could possibly imagine. "Good afternoon, officer," Arthur greeted him, voice firm but polite. Miller didn't reply. He leaned into the window and stared, sizing him up like a prosecutor eyeing a hostile witness. "License and registration," he snapped. Arthur complied silently, retrieving the documents from his glove box and wallet. As he handed them over, Miller glanced at the name. "Arthur Vance," he said aloud. "Nice car." "Arthur, what do you do for a living?" "Drug dealer. Gang enforcer." Arthur held his gaze. "I'm a government employee," he replied, "and I'm on my way to a private matter." "Did I violate any traffic laws, officer?" It was a straightforward question, but it hit Miller like an insult. He bristled. The calm tone, the confidence, this wasn't fear. This was defiance. From someone who should be afraid. "I'm the one asking questions here," Miller growled. "Now step out of the vehicle." Arthur didn't move. "Under the 4th Amendment, officer," he said smoothly, "you need probable cause to remove me from my vehicle and conduct a search." "May I ask what that cause is?" The words were like kindling. Miller's face twisted, eyes narrowing behind his shades. "Probable cause," he repeated mockingly. "How's this? I smell marijuana." "That's enough, right?" Arthur didn't blink. "That's a lie. And you know it," he said, voice colder now. I do not consent to his search without a warrant. To Miller, it was the final straw. This arrogant man who thought he was smarter, better needed to be put in his place. He yanked the door open with a violent jerk. Get out, he barked, grabbing Arthur's arm. Arthur stumbled slightly as he was pulled from the car. Hey, before the word was out, Miller had him spun and slammed against the vehicle. His cheek scraped the glass, his body pinned. You have the right to remain silent, Miller hissed, twisting one arm behind his back. Put your hands on the car. Spread your legs. 20 feet away. Officer David Peterson watched from the patrol vehicle, his face pale. He had seen stops like this during training on video. They were labeled what not to do. But now, it was real, right in front of him. And the man being manhandled didn't look like a criminal. He looked like someone's father. Someone important. And that's what terrified Peterson most of all. He opened the passenger door hesitantly and stepped out. Miller didn't care. He was focused on breaking this man's composure. He searched Arthur roughly, shoving his hands into pockets, patting his body with unnecessary aggression. Arthur didn't resist. He clenched his jaw, absorbed the insult. He had tried thousands of cases, heard stories of worse, but living it firsthand was different. It stung deeper than he imagined. When Miller found nothing, his frustration peaked. He looked over the roof of the car, lips curling. David, he called. Come here and keep an eye on this guy. Make sure he doesn't try anything. Peterson nodded slowly and approached, stepping between Arthur and the vehicle's driver's side window. Are you okay, sir? Peterson asked awkwardly, trying to sound human. Arthur didn't answer. His attention had shifted. Through the reflection in the side mirror, he saw Miller walk around to the other side of the Lincoln. He watched his movements to fast, to deliberate. Then he saw it. Miller reached into a hidden pouch in his vest and pulled out a small, crumpled paper bag. Arthur recognized it immediately. He had seen it too often in courtrooms. The magic evidence, drugs pulled from a mystery pocket, evidence that could put anyone in prison and make a career. This was it. The moment the abuse of power turned into a federal crime. Miller crouched and leaned into the vehicle. He was going to plan it. He thought he was untouchable, but he wasn't. Arthur straightened slightly. His voice was like steel, quiet, piercing, undeniable. Officer Miller, he said. Miller froze. I see what you're about to do. Arthur continued, voice razor sharp. Planning evidence is a federal felony. Title 18, Section 1512. Obstruction of justice. Miller spun around, eyes wide. He quickly tucked the bag back into his vest. You threatening me? He snapped. No. Arthur said, still calm. I'm informing you of the law. It was too much. The challenge, the composure, the refusal to break. Miller exploded. You think you're some damn lawyer? He roared, stepping forward and drawing his weapon in one fluid motion. The click of the Glock being unholstered echoed like thunder. Get down, on your knees, he screamed. Mark, no, Peterson shouted, frozen with panic. But Miller wasn't listening. He jammed the barrel of the pistol against Arthur's back, then his temple. Do you have any last words, buddy? He hissed. Arthur dropped to his knees, slowly, deliberately, not in fear but in control. His eyes locked on Miller's, unflinching. That's when time stopped. The wind hushed. The birds stilled. The world narrowed to two men on a roadside, one who thought he held power, and the other who embodied it. And just as Miller's finger began to tighten on the trigger, a voice rang out. Mark, don't. The dash cam, everything stopped. Miller froze. Dash cam, he had forgotten. The little black eye on the patrol dashboard had been watching. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to end his career. Maybe enough to land him behind the very bars he once mocked. His hand trembled. He lowered the gun. You're lucky, he spat. But even as he holstered the weapon, his mind raced for another way to win. And that's when he made one last desperate move. He slapped handcuffs on Arthur's wrists, tight and cold. You're under arrest for resisting arrest, threatening an officer, and possession of a controlled substance, he barked. Then he turned to Peterson. You saw the packet fall out of his pocket while I was restraining him, right? Peterson, shaking, nodded mutely. Fear had muted his conscience. Arthur said nothing, because he knew now that the real trial was just beginning. For a brief, horrifying moment, all that existed was the cold press of steel against Arthur Vance's temple. The gravel bit into his knees. The gun trembled and Officer Mark Miller's hand rage-fueled. Twitching, almost hungry. Time slowed to a crawl. The silence was deafening. The wind had paused. Nature itself seemed to hold its breath. Peterson's voice shattered that silence like glass. Mark, don't. The dash cam, it's on. It was a scream of panic, a desperate lifeline. Thrown across a crumbling cliff, Miller's brain short-circuited. He'd forgotten. The camera on the dashboard standard issue. Always recording. Always watching. He couldn't be sure how much it caught, but it didn't matter. The gun, the threats, the madness in his voice. That alone could be damning. He hesitated. And that single moment of hesitation saved Arthur Vance's life. The Glock lowered, but not the fury. Miller's hands were shaking not from fear of the judge, but fear of consequence. His ego, swollen and cracked, couldn't accept the humiliation. If he couldn't silence the man, he would at least ruin him. You're lucky, he snarled, but you're still going down. He yanked Vance's arms behind his back, snapping the cuffs tight, metal biting into wrist bones. You are under arrest for resisting, threatening a law enforcement officer, and possession of a controlled substance. Peterson flinched. Mark, we can't. Did you see the packet fall from his pocket? Miller turned to him, voice low and menacing. You saw it, right? The rookie swallowed hard. His mouth opened, closed. Fear clouded everything: his training, his instincts, his morals. Finally, he nodded, barely. Yeah, I saw it. Arthur didn't speak. He didn't resist. He didn't plead. Because he knew a storm was coming, and he wasn't the one who needed to worry. The drive back to the station was filled with Miller's taunts. Let's see how tough you are in a cell, he barked. Your smart mouth won't help you in there. Arthur said nothing. His gaze was fixed out the window, on the horizon, where trees lined the road like silent witnesses. But his mind was elsewhere, strategizing, recalling statutes, counting seconds. By the time they arrived at the Oak Creek police station, a crumbling brick relic, smelling of stale coffee and colder prejudice, Arthur had already filed away everything. The lies, the assault, the planted evidence, Peterson's cowardly nod. He was dragged inside like a trophy. The other officers looked up, smirking, whispering. Miller strutted like a man who had just brought in a cartel boss. Call your lawyer, Judge, he said through the cell bars, grinning. See what good that does you. Arthur sat on the rusted bench inside the cramped holding cell. The walls were stained, the air thick with mold and arrogance. He let out a long breath, centering himself. His hands still cuffed behind him, he leaned forward slightly and said, I'd like to make my phone call now. A young officer was sent to supervise. He handed Arthur a scratched-up phone receiver, clearly expecting theatrics. Instead, Arthur dialed the 10-digit number from memory. No hesitation. No contacts list. The phone rang. Once, twice. United States Marshals Service. This is David Chen. The young officer arched an eyebrow. U.S. Marshals. Arthur spoke clearly into the receiver, as if delivering a verdict. David, it's Arthur. Arthur Vance. There was a pause, then Chen's voice sharpened. Arthur? Where are you? What happened? I'm being held in custody at Oak Creek Township Police Department in Clayton County. I require assistance. Code 01. Repeat 0 Alpha 11. On the other end of the line, everything stopped. Chen didn't need a second explanation. OA11 was no routine badge flash. It was a nuclear-level distress call, a federal emergency protocol used only when a judge was in immediate danger, illegally detained, or worse. He stood up so fast his chair toppled. Copy that. Hold your position. Do not engage. Help is en route. The line went dead. Arthur turned calmly to the young officer and handed him the phone. Thank you. Still thinking it was some elaborate joke, the officer chuckled nervously and left the room. Old guy thinks he just called in the cavalry, he muttered to his colleagues. Says he's got the U.S. Marshals on speed dial. Laughter echoed through the hall. It didn't last long. 12 minutes later, thunder arrived not from the skies, but from the road. The screech of tires, the roar of engines. A black convoy of unmarked SUVs stormed into the station lot like something out of a government takedown movie. They came fast and hard, boxing in every exit. Doors flew open. Men in tactical gear emerged in fluid precision, weapons ready. Across their chests were not the names of counties or towns but the bold federal lettering, *FBI, U.S. Marshals, GBI. Inside, Chief Bill Hastings dropped his coffee. What in the hell is going on? He didn't finish the sentence. A sharply dressed man with an FBI badge and eyes like ice stepped into the lobby. Right behind him was a force the local PD couldn't even imagine. David Chen, Marshal in charge of judiciary protection. Every officer in this building, put down your weapons and stand still, the FBI agent announced. This is now a federal crime scene. The air went dead. Conversations stopped mid-word. Every eye turned. Every smirk disappeared. Miller stepped forward. What the hell is this? He demanded. The FBI agent didn't even look at him. He walked right past the desk, straight toward the cell block. Chen broke off. heading in the same direction, eyes burning. He didn't speak to Miller. He didn't look at Peterson. He moved with purpose, like a man arriving to rescue royalty. "Where's the prisoner?" he asked. The stunned officer from earlier pointed. "Last cell on the left." Chen approached the bars. Inside sat Arthur Vance, legs crossed, still calm, still watching. "Your Honor," Chen said with a nod. "We're here to bring you home." Arthur rose. "Good to see you again, David." Chen nodded back. "Likewise. You'll be safe now." As they exited the cell, the hallway was lined with stunned faces. Officers who had laughed hours earlier now stood rigid. Among them, Mark Miller stood frozen, jaw slack, color drained. Chen finally addressed him. "You're Officer Mark Miller." "Why, yeah. You're the one who arrested Judge Arthur Vance." "I didn't know who he was," Miller blurted. "He resisted. I thought he had drugs." Chen's voice dropped to a chill. "You arrested a federal judge. You planted evidence. You threatened him at gunpoint. You're under arrest for multiple federal offenses." As handcuffs clicked around his own wrist, the realization hit Miller like a freight train. He had pointed a gun at the law itself. Arthur didn't glance at him. He walked past as if Miller was already a memory, because in the grand design of justice he was. Inside the Oak Creek police station, everything moved in slow motion. Officers stood like statues, their hands hovering near their belts, eyes wide as the wave of federal agents crashed through the building. It was surreal, like a scene from a movie no one ever expects to live through. Tactical boots thudded against the cracked linoleum. Commands were barked, clear and professional. The power dynamic had shifted so quickly, it left the room spinning. Chief Bill Hastings, his guts spilling over his belt and his face flushed with confusion, stumbled into the main corridor, waving his hands. "What is this? What's going on here?" He was ignored. The FBI agent in charge and Marshal David Chen walked past him without acknowledgement, as though he didn't even exist. Power, when it moves correctly, doesn't have to raise its voice. And today, it wasn't Hastings' voice that mattered. It was the voice of justice, and justice had come to collect. Miller stood frozen near the water cooler, eyes darting, heart hammering in his chest. The swagger was gone. The arrogance had evaporated. All that remained was panic. He could feel the noose tightening. Then it happened. A federal agent approached. "Officer Mark Miller?" He nodded slowly, as if unsure whether reality had become a nightmare. "You are under arrest," the agent said coldly. Miller's mouth opened. Wait, this is a mistake. I didn't know who he was." He resisted. "I thought." The FBI agent cut him off. "Save it for court." As Miller was spun around and handcuffed the same cold metal he'd slapped on so many wrists, he locked eyes with Arthur Vance, now walking freely down the hallway. Vance didn't stop. He didn't speak. He didn't even blink. That silence, calm, dignified, final, was more brutal than any insult. It was the silence of a man whose truth no longer needed words. Miller was beneath acknowledgement, and he knew it. The click of the cuffs echoed louder than any siren. A few feet away, Officer David Peterson stood trembling. His conscience was boiling. The lies, the planted evidence, the silence, and now his chance. One of the agents turned to him. "Officer Peterson, you witnessed the entire event." Peterson nodded, then added, voice cracking but steady, "I saw everything. I want to cooperate. I want to tell the truth." And just like that, the illusion shattered. The thin blue wall, once an impenetrable shield of silence, cracked from within. Judge Arthur Vance was escorted out of the building and into a sleek black SUV. Flanked by federal agents, before the door closed, he leaned toward Marshal Chen and said, "David, make sure the dashcam footage from Patrol Car 704 is sealed and entered into primary evidence. Also, I want the last 5 years of complaint records from this department handed over to the Justice Department." Chen nodded. "Already in motion, Your Honor." The SUV door shut. The convoy peeled away, leaving behind the smoldering wreckage of a corrupt local police force, now under full federal occupation. Word spread like wildfire. News vans gathered outside the Oak Creek station. National headlines screamed, ****, federal judge illegally detained by local officer. ****, footage exposes attempted evidence planting. ****, rookie cop breaks silence in historic justice shakeup. The trial was set in Atlanta, U.S. versus Mark Miller, and it became a national sensation. In court, Miller sat like a ghost of himself, pale, shrunken, empty. The prosecution laid out the facts like stone tablets. ****, footage of the confrontation. Miller screaming, the drawn gun. ****, Peterson's sworn testimony. detailing every moment, every lie. Forensic evidence the untouched cocaine bag, fingerprints traced to Miller. Departmental complaints previously buried, now exposed. Patterns of racism, brutality. Covered -ups. The jury needed less than 2 hours. Guilty. Guilty on all counts: obstruction of justice, assault on a federal officer, deprivation of rights under color of law, conspiracy. At sentencing, the judge did not mince words. You didn't just assault a man. You assaulted the rule of law. You disgraced every honorable officer in this country. You believed your badge made you a god. But in this courtroom, it makes you accountable. 15 years in federal prison. No parole. As Miller was led away in shackles, he passed by reporters, cameras flashing like a firing squad. He didn't say a word. His legacy now carved not into medals or promotions, but in a cell number and a headline. But the fall of one man wasn't enough. The Justice Department launched a full investigation into the Oak Creek Police Department. The findings were explosive. Years of complaints ignored, brutality cases buried. Minority citizens disproportionately stopped, arrested, and harassed. The culture was rotten to the core. The verdict: disbanded. Oak Creek PD was shut down permanently. A new law enforcement structure, federally overseen, was implemented. New training, new leadership, zero tolerance for corruption. The town would never be the same. As for David Peterson, his cooperation spared him prosecution, but he resigned from the force, moved out of state, and began a quiet, new life. He would carry that day with him forever, not just as a memory, but as a scar that reminded him of the cost of silence and the courage it takes to break it. And Judge Arthur Vance? He returned to his courtroom. The robe slid over his shoulders heavier than before, not from age, but from experience, from the weight of nearly losing his life to the very system he had sworn to uphold. But he didn't let that weight break him, he let it shape him. Within months, he founded the Sarah Vance Justice Foundation named after his late wife, the woman who once filled that Lincoln with laughter and lilies. The foundation now provides free legal aid to victims of police abuse, especially those who don't have a code 0811 to save them, ordinary people, forgotten people. Because Vance hadn't just survived, he transformed. He turned injustice into reform, pain into purpose. Silence into legacy. The road hadn't changed. The same long stretch of cracked asphalt, the same quiet trees standing like sentinels. But this time, there were no flashing lights in the rear view, no patrol cars shadowing his every move, no shouting voices or trembling guns, just the steady hum of a Lincoln Town car gliding peacefully through the Georgia countryside. Arthur Vance sat behind the wheel, his hands at 10 and to just as they had been that day. But this drive was different. This wasn't a journey born of fear, or memory, or confrontation. It was a return, a full circle. He pulled up slowly to Oakwood Cemetery, gravel crunching softly under the tires. The air was still, reverent. In his hands was a simple bouquet of white lilies, the same flowers Sarah loved, the same ones he brought her every year. He stepped out of the car, his suit neat, his face calm, not the anonymous man in a polo and khakis. Today, he was the judge again, not because of the robe he wore, but because of the truth he carried. He approached the marble headstone with quiet steps. Her name was etched into the stone with grace: Sarah Vance, beloved wife, fierce soul, forever missed. He knelt, placed the lilies gently at its base, and whispered words no one else would hear. "I kept my promise," he said. For a moment, he just sat there silent, grounded, full of grief and peace in equal measure. He had walked through fire, and somehow she had been with him the whole way. But Arthur Vance didn't let the story end with the trial. He didn't return to his bench just to deliver verdicts. He returned to deliver change. Shortly after the events, in Oak Creek, he founded the Sarah Vance Justice Foundation, an organization built to serve those the system forgot. People who never had the privilege of a 0811 emergency code. People who never got second chances. The foundation offered pro bono legal defense, police accountability training, and investigative support in underserved communities. It became a beacon, a reminder that justice isn't a privilege for the powerful, but a right for the overlooked. Media outlets tried to label him a hero. He declined the title. He wasn't seeking revenge. He was building redemption. And the storm that tore through Oak Creek didn't stop at its borders. It swept across counties, across precincts, across politics. Other departments were investigated, other officers removed, other citizens empowered to speak. Because once the truth is seen, it cannot be unseen. And sometimes, the most dangerous man in the room is the one wearing no uniform at all. So the next time someone gets pulled over in the quiet of night, the next time a badge is flashed with arrogance, or a voice demands obedience instead of accountability. Remember this: justice watches silently, and it remembers everything. This isn't the end. It's only the beginning. The next chapter is coming, and the person behind the uniform may not be who you think. Stay tuned.